James Harlan had planned on dying in the desert, quietly, anonymously, swallowed by the same emptiness that had taken his family. But fate had other ideas. He found her where no one should have survived, an Apache widow trapped in a steel bear trap meant for monsters and men. Blood soaking the earth. Knife pressed to her own heart. Eyes promising she'd rather die than let him touch her. He freed her anyway. By nightfall, she lay fevered and half-conscious in his hidden cave while slavers swept the canyon searching for the wild girl who escaped their snare. By sunrise, the entire Apache war party stood outside his cave, not to kill him, not to reclaim her, but to demand he take her. A woman who hates him, a tribe that distrusts him, a past he can't outrun, and a future he never asked for. James Harlan had come to the desert to disappear. Instead, he became the center of a storm that could burn the entire territory to ash. Because saving her life was the easy part. What she owed him and what fate demanded next might cost him everything he has left. The trap, the woman, the ghost of a man. Time had stopped meaning anything to James Harlan the day he buried his wife and son in the hard Oklahoma earth. Now it was just sunrises and sunsets, one bleeding into the next like watercolors left too long in the rain. He'd been wandering the Arizona territory for 3 months or maybe 4. The desert had a way of swallowing weeks whole, leaving nothing but dust and the relentless percussion of hoofbeats. His horse, a gray mare he'd never bothered naming, picked her way through the arroyos while James let the reins hang loose. Where they were going didn't matter. There was nowhere left to go. The afternoon light painted everything in shades of rust and blood. Saguaros stood like sentinels watching his slow dissolution, and the silence pressed against his ears until he could hear his own heartbeat, steady and unwanted. Sometimes he thought about his son's laugh. Sometimes he forced himself not to. The guilt sat in his chest like a stone he'd swallowed, too heavy to cough up, too sharp to ignore. He saw the blood first. Dark droplets in the sand, already browning in the heat. His hand moved to his rifle before his mind caught up. Old instincts from a life he barely remembered living. Game, probably. Maybe a wounded deer, easy meat for a man who hadn't tasted anything but hardtack in days. He followed the trail around a cluster of barrel cacti, past a formation of red rock that looked like praying hands. The blood became a smear, then a pool, and then the woman. She was caught in a bear trap, the kind loggers used for grizzlies, massive iron teeth buried deep in her left leg just above the ankle. Blood soaked the sand beneath her in a dark halo. But what stopped James cold wasn't the trap or the blood or even the way her leg bent wrong. It was the knife. She had it pressed against her own chest, point dimpling the buckskin just over her heart, and her eyes, black as rifle barrels and twice as deadly, were locked on him with such concentrated hatred that he actually took a step back. "Don't," she said. The word came out in Apache first, then English, both edged with the same razor-wire warning. She was Apache, he realized. D. Her hair fell in a thick braid over one shoulder, her skin burnished copper beneath the dust and blood. Young, maybe early 20s, with the kind of beauty that made men stupid and dangerous. She wore white man's clothes, a chambray shirt torn at the shoulder, canvas pants dark with blood. But her eyes held something older, something that remembered when this land had no fences and no names. "Easy," James said, his voice rust-scraped from disuse. He held his hands up, rifle still slung across his back. "I'm not. I know what you are." Her knife hand trembled, but didn't waver. "I know what you all are." The trap's chain was staked deep into the ground. Professional work. Deliberate. This wasn't meant for bears. "How long you been here?" James asked, though he could see the answer in her gray pallor, the way her breathing came shallow and quick. "Hours, at least. Maybe since dawn." She didn't answer. Her free hand gripped her thigh above the wound, knuckles white, and he could see her making calculations, how much blood she could lose, how long until shock took her, whether she could get the knife into her own heart before he reached her. James recognized that look. He'd worn it himself, standing over 2 fresh graves with a pistol in his hand. "I'm going to kneel down," he said slowly. "I'm going to open that trap." You can stick me with that knife if you want, but you do it after, all right? After I get you free. Donna, she hissed. Go away. He knelt anyway. Up close, he could smell the blood, sharp and copper-bright, mixing with sage and sweat and fear. The trap was a monster, 40 pounds of iron locked with a spring strong enough to snap a man's leg like kindling. The teeth had punched through muscle and scraped bone. He could see white beneath the red. You do this, she said, voice dropping to something that might have been a growl or might have been a sob. They come. They're coming. James saw them then, as his hands closed around the trap's cold iron, the other tracks in the sand. Boot prints, not hooves. Multiple men, circling patterns, the kind of sign slavers left when they were running game to ground. His jaw tightened. How many? 3. Maybe 4. Her knife point dug deeper into her chest, drawing a bead of blood. Better dead then. Stop talking. He positioned his hands on the trap's jaws, muscles bunching. This is going to hurt like hell. Her eyes met his again, and for just a moment, the hatred flickered into something else, fear, yes, but also a question. Why? Why would a white man help an Apache woman? What did he want from her? James didn't have a good answer. Maybe he was just tired of everything dying. Maybe she looked at him the way his wife had once, like he might still be capable of one good thing. Maybe it didn't matter. He pulled. The trap spring resisted, fighting him, and his shoulders screamed as he forced the jaws apart. Blood welled fresh as the teeth withdrew, and Selena made a sound low and animal and gutting that he'd hear in his sleep for years. The trap snapped open. She gasped once, sharp as a gunshot, and her eyes rolled back. The knife clattered to the sand. James caught her before she fell, then stripped his shirt to wrap her leg tight enough to slow the bleeding. She was lighter than he expected, all whipcord muscle and sharp angles, her heart beat rabbit-quick against his bare chest as he lifted her. The mare shied as he approached, smelling blood and fear, but settled when he murmured to her. He secured Selena across the saddle, her black hair spilling like ink, then swung up behind her. The slaver tracks were clear as scripture in the sand. Northeast, maybe 2 hours old. They'd be back, checking their trap like men checking a snare line. James turned the mare west, toward the mountains, toward nothing and nowhere, toward the only thing he had left. Empty horizon and time that didn't matter. Selena's blood soaked warm into his thigh. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Alive for now. A knife's edge away from dead. I didn't save her because I'm a good man, James whispered to the desert, to God, to the ghosts that followed him everywhere. I saved her because she reminded me of everything I lost. She should hate him, but she needs him alive. The cave was 3 hours west, carved into sandstone by wind and time, hidden behind a curtain of juniper that had grown thick in the years since James last used it. He'd holed up there during the war, after Glorieta Pass, when half his unit was dead and the other half was scattered across New Mexico like seeds thrown to barren ground. The mare was lathered and blowing hard by the time they reached it. Selena had stopped making sounds an hour back, which worried him more than the moaning had. Her skin burned fever-hot against his chest, and twice he'd had to grip her tighter when she started to slide sideways. He dismounted carefully, easing her down into his arms. Her head lolled against his shoulder, black hair matted with sweat and dust. In the failing light, he could see the wound had already begun to fester, red streaks climbing her calf like poison vines. The cave smelled of pack rat and old smoke. James laid Selena on his bedroll near the back wall, away from the entrance, then covered the opening with brush. The mare he picketed in a narrow wash nearby where she could graze on buffalo grass without being seen from the ridge. When he returned, Selena was muttering in Apache, her head turning side to side like she was arguing with someone who wasn't there. He caught one word repeated, nault, soft and broken, the way you'd say a name you'd already said goodbye to. James built a small fire, just enough for light and to heat water. The flames threw dancing shadows across the cave walls, and for a moment he was back in Oklahoma, watching his cabin burn, knowing his family was still inside. He blinked hard and the vision scattered. The wound needed draining. He'd seen enough battlefield infections to know that much, let the poison sit, and she'd lose the leg, or worse. His knife went into the flames until the blade glowed dull red, and while it heated he tore his spare shirt into strips for bandages. "This is going to hurt," he said, even though she couldn't hear him. Maybe he was saying it for himself. He cut. The knife opened the wound clean, and pus and blood ran thick down her leg. Selina's eyes snapped open, black and wild with pain, but she didn't scream. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist hard enough to leave bruises, fingernails digging crescents into his skin, but she stayed silent. Just a low sound in her throat, continuous, like a wolf caught in wire. Their eyes met. Hers were full of agony and fury and something else, recognition maybe, that he was trying to help even if it felt like torture. He flushed the wound with whiskey, packed it with clean cloth, wrapped it tight. By the time he finished, Selina had passed out again, her grip on his wrist gone slack. James sat back against the cave wall and listened to the night settle around them. Coyotes called from distant ridges. Wind moved through the juniper with a sound like running water. His hands shook, delayed reaction from the day's violence, or maybe just exhaustion finally catching up to bones that had been tired for months. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his son's face, blue-lipped and still. Heard his wife's last rattling breath. Felt the weight of dirt falling on wood, final as amen. Selina whispered in the darkness. "Nalt, Shikis. Brother. My brother. Not a husband, then." James felt an irrational flicker of something that might have been relief, which made him angry at himself. What did it matter? She was Apache. He was white. She'd probably killed soldiers. He'd probably killed her people. There was nothing between them but blood debt and circumstance. He added another stick to the fire and watched her sleep. Dawn came gray and uncertain. James slipped out of the cave before full light, moving quiet through the scrub oak to check their back trail. He saw them immediately, 3 riders on the ridge a mile east, moving slow, reading sign. One of them pointed toward the juniper line. James pulled back into the cave and checked his rifle. 16 rounds. His pistol had 6 more. Enough, if it came to that. If it came to that, Selina was dead anyway. She couldn't ride, couldn't run, could barely stay conscious. He took up position near the entrance where he had good sight lines and waited. The riders came closer, then closer still. Near enough that James could hear their voices carrying on the morning air, rough, laughing, talking about what they'd do when they found the squaw. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then one of them shook his head, pointed south instead. They turned and rode parallel to the juniper line, still searching but moving away. James didn't lower the rifle until they disappeared over the far ridge. When he came back inside, Selina was awake. Her eyes tracked him as he set the rifle down, and he could see the fever had broken sometime during the night. She looked weak, hollowed out, but present in a way she hadn't been since he'd found her. "Why did you save me?" Her English was good, barely accented, and her voice was steady despite the pain he knew she must be feeling. James settled against the opposite wall. The question hung between them like gun smoke. "I don't know," he said, because it was true. "I would have killed you. If I could have." "I know." Selina shifted, wincing, propping herself up on one elbow. "I've killed white men before. Soldiers. One had blonde hair like yours. He cried for his mother when I've killed Apache," James interrupted. "During the war. Civilians caught in crossfire. A woman once, carrying water. I didn't mean to, but she was dead just the same." The confession sat between them, ugly and honest. "So we're even?" Selina asked, and there might have been dark humor in it. "No," James said. "We're just both damned." She studied him for a long moment, and he couldn't read what was happening behind those black eyes. Then she lay back down, carefully, favoring her wounded leg. "Those men will come back," she said. "I know. You should leave me. Take your horse and go." James looked at her, this woman who'd held a knife to her own heart rather than be taken, who'd endured his knife cutting her open without screaming, who'd killed his people just as he'd killed hers. "Can't do that," he said. "Why not?" He didn't have a good answer for that either. Maybe because leaving her felt like burying his family all over again. Maybe because she was the first thing in months that had made him feel something other than numb. Maybe because when he looked at her, he didn't see an enemy. He saw another broken soul, clinging to breath just like he was. "Get some rest," James said instead. "We'll move when you can ride." Selena closed her eyes, but James thought he saw something soften in her face before she did. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the promise of more dust, more miles, more running. Inside the cave, two people who should have been enemies breathed the same smoke-tinged air and didn't reach for their weapons. Her people appear at dawn. They came with the sun. James woke to the sound of nothing, that particular quality of silence that meant predators were near. He had his rifle in hand before his eyes were fully open, moving to the cave entrance in a crouch. 12 Apache warriors sat their horses in a semicircle 30 yards out, so still they might have been carved from the same red rock that surrounded them. They wore a mix of traditional dress and stolen cavalry gear, their faces painted for war or mourning. James couldn't tell which. Maybe both. He looked back at Selena. She was awake, propped against the cave wall, her face gone carefully blank in a way that told him everything he needed to know. She'd been expecting this. "Stay here," James said. "They will kill you." "Maybe." He set the rifle down against the wall, keeping it would just get him killed faster. "But if I come out shooting, they'll definitely kill me. And probably you too." He walked out with his hands visible and empty, the morning sun hitting him like a fist. The warriors didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him with eyes that had seen white men do every terrible thing imaginable and expected nothing better now. The oldest warrior dismounted. 60 maybe, with gray streaking his long hair and a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw. He moved with the careful dignity of a man whose authority didn't need to be demonstrated, only observed. "I am Nakai," he said in clear English. "Where is my daughter?" James jerked his chin toward the cave. "Inside. Wounded but alive." Nakai's eyes flickered with something that might have been relief, but it vanished as quickly as smoke. He barked something in Apache and two younger warriors dismounted, moving past James toward the cave. James forced himself to stay still, to not reach for weapons he didn't have. They emerged a moment later, half carrying Selena between them. She kept weight off her wounded leg, but her spine was straight, her face fierce despite the obvious pain. When she saw Nakai, something complicated passed between them, love and anger and old arguments that had nothing to do with James. Nakai spoke rapidly in Apache, his voice rising. Selena answered back just as sharp, gesturing at her wrapped leg, at James, at the ground between them. The exchange went on for a full minute, their voices cutting through the morning air like blades, until Nakai raised one hand and Selena fell silent. The old warrior turned to James, and his eyes were cold as winter stone. "You touched my daughter." It wasn't a question. James kept his voice level. "I treated her wounds. She'd have died otherwise. The trap had cut through to bone. Infection was already setting in. I cleaned it, drained it, bandaged it. Nothing more. You carried her 3 days' ride. She couldn't walk. You slept 3 nights in her presence." James saw where this was going and felt the trap closing around him just as surely as the iron had closed around Selena's leg. "I slept across the cave from her." "I never." "Our law is clear," Nakai interrupted. His English was formal, precise, like he was reciting something sacred. "A widow may not be touched by a man outside marriage. To save her life, to tend her body, to keep her through 3 nights, these are the obligations of a husband. You have acted as husband. You must become husband." The words hit James like a physical blow. Behind Nakai, the other warriors sat motionless, watching. Selena's face showed nothing, but her hands were fists at her sides. "And if I refuse?" James asked. "Then my daughter becomes Dakosa, untouchable. No Apache man may marry her, speak to her, hunt for her, trade with her. She will live alone until she dies alone." Nakai's voice held no mercy, just the weight of law older than memory. "She saved her honor by nearly taking her own life. You stole that choice from her. Now you must restore what you have taken." James looked at Selena. Her eyes met his, black and burning and full of things she wouldn't say. Pride, yes. Shame, maybe. Fear of a future she couldn't control. But underneath it all, something else. A question without words. What do you want? James asked her directly. The warrior stirred at his audacity, speaking to her without permission, treating her like her opinion mattered. Nakai's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Selena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, each word chosen like ammunition. What I want does not matter. She held his gaze. But if you stay, you protect my people. Your presence, your knowledge of white man's ways, She gestured vaguely at him, your face. It could mean survival for those who remain. James understood then. This wasn't about love or desire or even obligation. This was about survival. Strategy. A white man married to an Apache woman might mean one less enemy, might mean advance warning, might mean the difference between massacre and escape. He thought about Oklahoma. The cabin burning. The graves he dug with his own hands. The gun he'd held to his own head twice before his cowardice failed him. He thought about the last 6 months of wandering, half dead, waiting for something to give him permission to finally stop breathing. He looked at Selena, fierce and wounded and alive, so alive it hurt to see. For the first time in a year, James chose something other than death. I'll stay, he said. Nakai nodded once, sharp and final as a door closing. Then it is done. You're bound by Apache law. Break it, and we will hunt you across every territory from here to the Great Water. James barely heard him. He was watching Selena's face, watching something that might have been relief or might have been resignation flicker across her features before her mask fell back into place. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last of the morning cold. And James Harlan, who'd buried everything he loved, found himself suddenly, impossibly married. A forced life, a slow-burn bond. The Apache camp sat in a box canyon where water ran year-round and pinyon pines offered cover from cavalry scouts. 23 people, Nakai told him, all that remained of a band that had once numbered over 200. Women, children, old men, and a handful of warriors too stubborn or too angry to accept reservation life. They accepted James the way a body accepts a splinter, necessary to remove eventually, but tolerated for now. The ceremony was brief and without joy. Nakai spoke words James didn't understand while the tribe formed a circle around him and Selena. She wore a dress of white doeskin that someone had kept wrapped in cedar, and her hair hung loose down her back, still damp from ritual washing. She didn't look at James. He didn't blame her. When it was done, Nakai's wife, a severe woman named Ishta, led them to a wickiup at the edge of camp. It was larger than most, built for a family, but inside a partition of tanned hide divided it cleanly in two. Selena's side held a bedroll, a few clay pots, a parfleche bag decorated with geometric patterns. James's side held nothing. You sleep there, Selena said, pointing to the bare earth. Do not cross. Wasn't planning on it. She limped to her side of the partition and let the hide fall between them like a curtain closing on a stage. The first week was silence and observation. James moved through the camp like a ghost, always aware of eyes tracking him, hands near weapons. The children stared openly until their mothers called them back. The warriors ignored him with the kind of deliberate dismissal that was somehow worse than hostility. He learned by watching. How to move through camp quietly, feet placed deliberately to avoid snapping twigs. How to build a fire that gave maximum heat with minimum smoke. How to read the sky for weather, the ground for game, the horizon for danger. Selena's leg healed slowly. She walked with a limp she tried to hide, and James pretended not to notice. She taught him things without asking if he wanted to learn. Showed him which plants stopped bleeding, which ones brought down fever, which ones would kill you if you made tea from the wrong part. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, breaking stems, crushing leaves, and James found himself watching those hands more than he should. This is OSHA root, she said one morning, digging near the creek. Good for cough, for wound that will not close. She held it out to him. Smell. He leaned close. Their shoulders almost touched. The roots smelled sharp and clean, like the air after lightning. Celery, he said. What? It smells like celery. A plant we white people eat. Something flickered across her face. Your people eat medicine? Guess so. Never thought about it that way. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she turned back to her digging and the moment passed. By the second week, she trusted him with tasks. He ground corn while she tended the cook fire, their hands working in rhythm. His pressing the stone manno down, hers stirring the pot. Once, reaching for the same water skin, their fingers brushed. Both pulled back like they'd touched hot iron. James watched her when she thought he wasn't looking. Watched how she moved through camp with quiet authority, how the other women deferred to her despite her youth, how she could skin a rabbit in under a minute and make it look like prayer. She had scars. A puckered burn on her left forearm, a thin white line along her collarbone, another on her right thigh he'd seen when treating her leg. Each one was a story she hadn't told. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with softness. All angles and strength and eyes that missed nothing. He was noticing too much. Caring too much. It felt like a betrayal. One evening he was checking the horses, a task Selena had assigned him after determining he at least knew one end from the other. When she appeared beside him silent as smoke. The gray mare, she said. She trusts you. She's a good horse. You never named her. James ran his hand down the mare's neck. Didn't see the point. Selena was quiet for a moment, then, things without names still exist. Still matter. He looked at her. She was studying the mare, not him, but he felt the weight of what she wasn't saying. I'll think on it, he said. That night, lying on his side of the partition, James heard her moving around. The soft sounds of her preparing for sleep had become familiar, the rustle of her removing her dress, the quiet splash of water from the clay bowl, the creak of leather as she settled into her bedroll. James. Her voice came through the hide, barely above a whisper. Yeah. Do you miss your wife? The question hit him in the chest. He stared at the hide partition, at the shadow play of firelight that showed her silhouette sitting up. Every day, he said. Every hour of every day. Silence. Then, what was her name? Rebecca. Our son was Thomas. Tommy. His throat closed around the names. I wasn't there when they died. The fever came fast. By the time I got back from town, they were already gone. I should have been there. Should have, something. You would have died with them. Yeah, that would have been better. More silence. James thought maybe she decided he wasn't worth the conversation, but then she spoke again, her voice so soft he had to strain to hear. My husband was not. He died in my arms. We were running from soldiers. He pushed me behind a rock, and they shot him 7 times. I held him while he bled. I felt his last breath against my face. A pause. I begged him not to leave me. He said he was sorry. As if it was his fault for dying. James closed his eyes. How long ago? 2 summers. I thought the pain would stop. It does not stop. No, James agreed. It doesn't. Through the partition, he heard her lie back down. The fire popped and settled. Outside, an owl called its hunting cry into the darkness. James. Yeah, thank you. For the trap. For not leaving me. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. But something in his chest, something that had been locked tight since Oklahoma, loosened just slightly. They lay there separated by hide and grief and circumstances neither had chosen, 2 people bound by loss, learning to breathe in the same space without flinching. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even friendship yet. But it was something. And for the first time in months, James Harlan fell asleep without seeing his family's graves behind his eyes. The kidnapping and sacrifice. The screaming woke the camp. James was on his feet before his mind caught up, rifle in hand, stumbling out of the wickiup into pre-dawn gray. Women were running toward the center of camp, men shouting, and underneath it all a sound that made his blood ice over, children crying for their mothers. But the children weren't there. He found Knock-High at the southern edge of camp, staring at tracks in the dirt. Fresh boot prints, at least 6 men, leading away toward the canyon mouth. A piece of cloth hung from a mesquite branch. Calico, the kind children wore. Below it, scratched into a flat stone with a knife point, were words in crude English. Return the widow or they are sold. James felt Selena arrive beside him before he saw her. She stood frozen, reading the words, her face draining of color. Who? She whispered. 3 children. One of the women sobbed behind them. Kaya, DeSoda, little Bidzil, and Nailnish and her daughter Sahel. 5 people. 3 of them children, the youngest maybe 6 years old. The camp erupted. Warriors gathered, voices rising in fury, hands on weapons. They wanted blood. They wanted to ride now, to kill every white man between here and Mexico if that's what it took. We track them, one young warrior snarled. We take them back. By the time we find them, they'll be gone, Nakai said, his voice heavy as stone. Split up, scattered. These men know the territory. They've been hunting us for months. Then what do we do? Another demanded. Let them sell our children? Silence fell over the group. James felt it before he saw it, every eye turning toward Selena. The widow. The reason. The price that would buy the children back. Selena stepped forward. Her limp was more pronounced this morning, but her spine was straight. When she spoke, her voice carried across the camp. This is because of me. She looked at Nakai. They want me. They've always wanted me. So I will go. No. James didn't realize he'd moved until he was between Selena and the gathered tribe, his body blocking hers. You won't go. Selena grabbed his arm, tried to pull him aside. This is not your choice. Like hell it isn't. He turned to face the tribe, these people who'd accepted him with suspicion and barely concealed hostility, who'd given him shelter because they had to, not because they wanted to. I'll go instead. The suggestion landed like a stone in still water. Nakai's eyes narrowed. You. A white man's worth more than an Apache woman, we all know that. Those slavers, they can sell me for labor, trade me up north, ransom me back to the army if they think I'm worth enough. James kept his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. But Selena? They want her for something worse. And once they have her, there's no guarantee they'll release anyone. They won't release you either, one of the warriors spat. Maybe not. But at least I'm choosing it. Selena moved around him, her face furious. You're insane. You don't understand what these men, what they'll do. I understand just fine. James met her eyes. You die for these children. For your people. I've seen it in your face every day since I got here. So now let me. This isn't your tribe. These aren't your people. No, James agreed. But you are. The words hung between them. Selena's eyes went wide, her mouth opening, but no sound coming out. Around them, the tribe had gone quiet, watching this exchange with expressions ranging from confusion to calculation. Nakai stepped closer. You would do this? Trade yourself for our children. I would. Why? The old warrior's voice was sharp as flint. You owe us nothing. We've given you no loyalty, no welcome. Why would you die for us? James thought about Oklahoma. About his son's grave and his wife's and the empty space where his heart used to be. About the last 6 months wandering, already dead, just waiting for his body to catch up. Because, he said quietly, I couldn't save my own family. Maybe I can save yours. Nakai studied him for a long moment, then turned to the gathered warriors and spoke rapidly in Apache. Arguments broke out immediately, some nodding, others shouting disagreement. The debate raged for minutes while Selena stood frozen, her eyes locked on James. Finally, Nakai raised his hand for silence. If you do this, he said to James, you go with 2 warriors. They will watch from distance, see where they take you. If they kill you immediately, we attack. If they take you alive. He paused. We will try to get all of you back. That's all I'm asking. No. Selena grabbed James's arm, her fingers digging and hard enough to bruise. No, this is insane. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He turned to face her fully, put his hands on her shoulders. Selena, listen to me. They'll torture you. Sell you. Leave you to die in the desert. Her voice cracked. You're doing this for people who don't even want you here. I'm doing this because it's right. He paused. And, because if anything happened to you, I couldn't. He didn't finish. Couldn't finish. Because finishing that sentence meant admitting something he wasn't ready to admit, something that felt like a betrayal of everything he'd lost. Selena's eyes were wet. She blinked hard, furious at herself, at him, at the entire situation. You're a fool, she whispered. Yeah, probably. She reached up suddenly, put her hands on either side of his face, and pressed her forehead to his. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that James stopped breathing. He could feel her trembling, could smell sage and smoke in her hair, could hear her breath coming fast and shallow. Don't die, she said against his skin. Not for me. Not for anyone. Just, don't die. I'll try not to. Promise me. Her hands tightened on his face. Promise me you'll come back. James knew better than to make promises he might not keep. But looking at her, this fierce, broken woman who'd somehow become the first thing in a year that made him want to survive, he found himself saying it anyway. I promise. She pulled back, and for just a second he saw everything she wasn't saying written across her face. Fear. Anger. Something else that looked dangerously like hope. Then her mask slammed back down, and she was the widow again, proud and alone. Go, she said. Before I change my mind and gut you myself. James nodded to Nakai, collected his rifle and knife, and walked toward the canyon mouth. 2 warriors fell in behind him, silent, grim-faced, probably hoping he'd die just to simplify things. He didn't look back. If he looked back, he'd see Selena watching, and if he saw that, he might lose his nerve. The sun broke over the canyon rim, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. James Harlan walked toward slavers and an uncertain death, and for the first time since Oklahoma, he had a reason to want to live. The rescue, the battle, the wound. The slavers' camp sat in a natural amphitheater of red rock, walls rising steep on 3 sides like the devil had carved himself an arena. James counted 6 men as he walked in. Hands raised, rifle left behind on Nakai's orders, looking as harmless as a lamb walking into wolves. They saw him coming from 100 yards out. Well. The leader was a thick-shouldered man with a beard gone gray at the edges and eyes like chips of dirty ice. What do we have here? I'm the trade, James said, stopping 10 feet from their fire. Me for the people you took. The slavers looked at each other and laughed. One of them, narrow-faced with a scar splitting his lip, circled around behind James, still chuckling. You. The leader spat tobacco juice into the fire. They sent one broken-down white boy? I'm worth more than an Apache woman. You know it, I know it. So, let's make this simple. Simple. The leader stood, stretched, pulled a knife from his belt and used it to pick at his teeth. Tell you what's simple, boy. We take you and keep the squaw. How's that sound? James had expected this. Counted on it, even. Men like these didn't honor deals. They took what they could and laughed while taking it. That's not the offer, James said carefully. His eyes tracked the camp. 5 children huddled near a wagon. He could see little Bidziel's tear-streaked face. The 2 women sat bound nearby, Nailnish with blood dried on her temple. The offer is me for them. Take it or leave it. The leader moved closer, knife still in hand. Or maybe we just cut your throat and go collect that widow ourselves. You could try. Something in James's voice made the man pause. Made him look closer at this unarmed fool who'd walked into their camp like he was inviting death. You got stones, I'll give you that. The leader grinned. Stupid, but stones. That's when James whistled. It was a bird call, a canyon wren's descending trill, and to anyone who didn't know better it sounded natural as sunrise. But James saw the slavers' faces change as shadows detached from the rock walls above them. Apache warriors, 12 of them, arrows already nocked. The hell, the leader started. Nakai's voice rang out from the rocks. Release them. Now. The camp exploded into chaos. Slavers dove for weapons, but arrows were already flying. James threw himself sideways as a bullet screamed past his ear, rolling behind the wagon where the children cowered. One slaver went down with an arrow through his throat, another took 2 to the chest. The narrow-faced man rushed James with a rifle stock raised. James caught it, twisted, drove his elbow into the man's jaw hard enough to feel bones crack. Grabbed the rifle as he fell and fired point-blank into the chest of a third slaver who'd been drawing on the children. Gunfire and screams filled the amphitheater. Apache warriors swarmed down the rock walls like water finding cracks, and the slavers' advantage of position meant nothing when death came from above. James shielded the children with his body, cutting through the ropes binding the women. "Run," he told them. "Get them out of here." Nailnish grabbed her daughter and the other children, herding them toward the canyon mouth. James stayed between them and the remaining slavers, firing until the rifle clicked empty. That's when he saw the leader. The man had abandoned the fight, was running for the horses, clearly planning to escape while his men died. James threw the empty rifle aside and ran after him, tackling him just as he reached the picket line. They went down hard. The leader was bigger, heavier, and he used it, rolling on top, raining punches down that James blocked with his forearms. James bucked him off, scrambled up, caught a boot to the ribs that drove the air from his lungs. The knife appeared from nowhere. James felt it before he saw it, cold fire punching into his left side just below his ribs. The leader's face was inches from his, grinning, twisting the blade. "Die slow, you Apache-loving piece of..." James headbutt him. The man's nose crunched and he staggered back, knife pulling free with a wet sound that James felt in his teeth. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it until something popped, caught the falling knife with his other hand. The leader's eyes went wide. James drove the blade up under his ribs, angled toward the heart, exactly the way his father had taught him to butcher hogs back in Missouri. The man made a sound like air leaving a bellows and collapsed. James stood over him, breathing hard, blood running hot down his side. The world tilted sideways. Around him, the fighting was over. Bodies in the sand. Smoke from scattered fires. Apache warriors securing the camp, checking the fallen. The children safe. The women safe. Mission accomplished. James took 2 steps toward where Nakai stood coordinating the warriors, and his legs went out from under him. The ground hit him hard. Sky wheeled overhead. Impossibly blue, dotted with vultures already circling. He tried to stand, but his body wasn't listening anymore. His side felt like someone had shoved hot coals into it. He heard shouting, running footsteps. Then Selena's face above him, her hands on his chest, his face, frantically checking for wounds. "You fool," she was saying, her voice breaking. "You stupid, reckless fool. Don't you dare die on me. Do you hear me? Don't you dare." Her hands found the wound and pressed down hard. James groaned, tried to push her away. She held firm, putting her weight into it, her face fierce and terrified all at once. "Where's the medicine bag?" she shouted over her shoulder. "Bring water. And cloth. Now." James tried to speak, but it came out as a cough. "Tasted copper. Not good. Don't talk." Selena's face was wet. She was crying and furious about it, swiping at her eyes with one bloody hand while the other stayed pressed to his wound. "Just breathe. Just keep breathing." "I came back," James managed, his voice barely a whisper. He reached up, touched her face weakly, his fingers leaving red streaks on her cheek. "Just like you asked." Her breath hitched. She grabbed his hand, pressed it against her face, held it there. "You're not allowed to die," she said. "I forbid it. Do you understand? I forbid it." James wanted to tell her that wasn't how dying worked. Wanted to tell her a lot of things. That she was beautiful when she was angry. That he hadn't felt alive until he met her. That somewhere between the trap and this moment he'd stopped seeing her as a stranger and started seeing her as something else entirely. But his mouth wouldn't form the words. The sky was dimming at the edges, gray creeping in like storm clouds. Selena's face got closer. He felt her breath on his skin. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please. James, please stay." He tried. God, he tried. But the gray was spreading, pulling him down into something that felt like sleep but deeper, and the last thing he saw before it took him was Selena's face hovering above his own, beautiful and broken and more precious than anything he'd ever seen. Then darkness swallowed him whole. Somewhere far away, he heard her screaming his name. But he couldn't answer. He couldn't answer at all. The covenant, the bond, the first real night. 6 weeks. It took 6 weeks for the wound to close, for James to walk without doubling over, for the fever dreams to finally stop chasing him through the night. Selena had tended him through all of it, changing bandages, forcing bitter medicine down his throat, sitting beside him in the dark when the pain got bad enough that he couldn't sleep. She never left him alone. Not once. Now he stood outside Nakai's wickiup in the cool morning air, watching the tribe gather. The old man had called for a ceremony. Not the rushed, obligatory binding they'd done before, but something deeper. Something sacred. This is different, Nakai had told him 3 days ago. The first was law. This is choice. You bled for us. You nearly died for our children. Now we offer you what we could not offer before, true acceptance. True family. James had looked at Selena when Nakai said it. She'd been grinding mesquite pods, her hands moving in that steady rhythm he'd come to know, but her eyes had lifted to meet his. Something had passed between them in that look, a question, an answer, a recognition of something that had been growing in the spaces between words for months now. The ceremony began at sunrise. The tribe formed a circle in the center of camp, and Nakai stood at its heart wearing ceremonial paint and holding a length of tan leather cord. James walked forward when called, his sides still stiff but healing clean. Beside him, Selena moved with that slight limp that would probably never fully fade, her legs scarred but strong beneath the white doeskin dress she wore. She looked at him differently now. The wariness was gone, replaced by something softer, something that made his chest tight when he caught her watching him. Nakai spoke in Apache, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. James didn't understand all the words, but he caught enough: covenant, bond, choice, forever. The old man took James's right wrist and Selena's left, brought them together. You were bound by law, Nakai said in English, clearly wanting James to understand. Now you bind yourselves by will. This is not obligation. This is not debt. This is choosing, each morning, each night, each breath, to stand together. To fight together. To live together or die together, as one spirit in 2 bodies. He wrapped the leather cord around their joined wrists, once, twice, 3 times. Each loop felt like a vow James couldn't speak, but could feel settling into his bones. What you have chosen, let no man break. What you have bound, let no force sever. Nakai's hands pressed over theirs. You are no longer widow and stranger. You are husband and wife in all ways, before all spirits, until the world ends or you do. The tribe murmured approval. Not the grudging tolerance of before, but something real. Acceptance. Welcome. Nakai unwound the cord and tied it around Selena's wrist like a bracelet. She would wear it, James understood, until it wore away to nothing. A reminder. A promise. When the ceremony ended, the tribe dispersed to prepare food and drink for the celebration that would follow. But Selena took James's hand and led him away from the gathering, toward their wickiup at the edge of camp. Inside, she let the hide door fall closed behind them. The partition that had divided the space for months was gone. Just one room now. One bedroll, wider than before. One fire. One life. Selena stood in the center of it all, her hands twisting the leather cord around her wrist. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know how to do this. James stayed near the door, giving her space. Do what? This. With someone who... She closed her eyes. Someone who isn't him. The confession hung between them, honest and raw. James understood. He'd been carrying Rebecca's ghost with him every day since Oklahoma, wondering if letting her go meant forgetting her, if moving forward meant betrayal. He crossed the space between them slowly, giving her time to stop him. When he reached her, he didn't touch, just stood close enough that she could feel his presence, his warmth. Then we'll learn together, he said softly. Selena's eyes opened. They were wet, but she didn't let the tears fall. I'm afraid, she admitted. Afraid of forgetting. Afraid of remembering. Afraid of wanting this when I shouldn't. Why shouldn't you? Because wanting means losing eventually. Everything I've ever wanted has been taken. Her voice cracked. My family. My husband. My people. My freedom. Everything. James reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm beneath his palms, and he felt her tremble. I can't promise nothing will be taken, he said. I can't promise we'll survive what's coming. Cavalry, slavers, winter, any of it. But I can promise this. Whatever time we have, I choose to spend it with you. Not because I have to. Because I want to. A tear escaped, tracking down her cheek to his thumb. Why? Because you make me want to live again. Because when I'm with you, I'm not just a ghost walking through days I don't want. Because you're fierce and brave, and you save me just as much as I saved you. He paused. And because I'm falling in love with you, Selena. Have been for weeks now. Maybe since the trap. Maybe since you held that knife to your own heart and looked at me like I was death itself and you weren't afraid. Her breath caught. Her hands came up to cover his. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. I don't know if I can be what you need. You already are. She kissed him then, sudden and fierce, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him close like she was afraid he'd disappear. James wrapped his arms around her, careful of his healing wound, and kissed her back with everything he'd been holding inside for months. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Selena's face had transformed. The mask was gone completely, leaving only the woman beneath, vulnerable and strong and so beautiful it hurt to look at her. Show me, she said. Show me how to do this. How to be with someone again. James took her hand and led her to the bedroll. They undressed slowly. Not with urgency, but with reverence, each scar and mark a story being shared. Selena's hands trembled as she helped him with his shirt, careful around the still pink wound on his side. His fingers fumbled with the ties of her dress until she laughed softly and helped him. When they lay down together, skin against skin, James just held her for a long time. Felt her heartbeat against his chest. Felt her breath on his neck. Felt her slowly relax into him, the tension draining away. I thought I'd died in that fight, he said into her hair. Thought that was it. The gray was closing in, and all I could think was that I'd never get to tell you. Shoo. Selena pressed her fingers to his lips. You're here. I'm here. That's enough. She kissed him again, softer this time, and this kiss became another and another until words weren't necessary anymore. Their first night together wasn't driven by lust, but by something deeper. A need to affirm life, to heal wounds that weren't physical, to build something new from the broken pieces of who they'd been. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with tenderness and occasional laughter when they fumbled, with whispered reassurances when old ghosts appeared, with a growing certainty that this moment, this person, this choice was right. Afterward, Selena lay curled against James's chest, one hand over his heart, her scarred leg draped across his. The fire had burned down to coals, painting everything in warm amber light. I can feel your heart, she murmured. It's steady. Yeah, mine too. For the first time in years. She lifted her head to look at him. You did that. James traced patterns on her bare shoulder, learning the landscape of her skin. Maybe we did it together. She smiled, a real smile, unguarded and genuine, and settled back against him with a contented sound. Outside, the tribe's celebration continued. Music and laughter drifted through the hide walls, reminding them they weren't alone in the world even if it felt that way right now. James held Selena in his arms, felt her warmth against his chest, her breath evening out into sleep. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, hollow, broken, wandering through days he didn't want. He thought about the graves in Oklahoma and the pistol he'd held to his own head. He thought about the woman in the trap, knife pressed to her own heart, eyes full of defiance and pain. Maybe I didn't save her, James thought as sleep began to pull him under. Maybe she saved me. Selena stirred against him, murmured something in Apache that might have been his name. James kissed the top of her head and let himself fall into darkness, not the gray void of dying, but the peaceful black of earned rest. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't afraid of tomorrow. He was looking forward to it.